Today we have, three folks presenting, and we're going to start out with Morgaine McKibben. And Morgaine has a background in coastal and estuarine biological oceanography with an emphasis on satellite oceanography, and she's currently in the Ocean Ecology Lab at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center and the PACE mission applications lead. And she's going to start us off talking a little bit about PACE, and then we have two other speakers as well who are going to share a little bit more about PACE data and how you can use some PACE data for land observations. So I'll let Morgaine take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to talk with you all about PACE. And so we'll just kick it off with our acronym. So our acronym is Plankton, Aerosol, Cloud, Ocean, Ecosystem. That's what PACE stands for. You'll wonder why we're here at a land webinar, and you will know by the end of today why we are here talking about land stuff with that acronym. So this slide is kind of a one-slide takeaway of if you kind of remember nothing else about our mission as a whole. I hope that you know these cool things about us. We were launched in 2024, and PACE is unique in that it gives continuous global scale imaging spectroscopy of Earth every day, which isn't provided by any other satellite platform. We have a hyperspectral sensor that sees from the UV through the visible through the near infrared in high spectral detail, plus a couple of SWIR bands. And we also have two polarimeters aboard that provide high accuracy atmospheric measurements. I'll go into the instruments in just a little bit more detail in a second, but really this kind of big takeaway is that PACE Earth observations are truly multidisciplinary. We're providing, our data is giving new insights on phytoplankton in the sea, plants on the land, particles in the air, cloud types, and a lot more. There's a couple of cool examples over here, on the right side of the slide, such as, measuring monthly net primary productivity across the US with a spectral approach. It's a new approach that has kind of less assumptions than previous methods do. So kind of looking at how can we calculate net primary productivity in new and perhaps more accurate ways. Also, how can we identify harmful algal blooms in the sea in new and more accurate ways with all this hyperspectral information. We even have a research group that has figured out how to find, identify or measure trace gases with PACE OCI, or with our hyperspectral information, which we're pretty excited about, producing a product that's just a little over 1 kilometer in spatial resolution. That it's unique in its own right in the air quality realm because it's the only one available at that high resolution. We also, this one right here is taken with one of our polarimeters. I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, actually. And it's identifying different kind of aerosol types with our polarimetric information following a wildfire in Los Angeles. So there's really a lot that PACE can do, and we're super excited about it. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of our instrumentation and then kind of dive into the land, part of PACE. So this is the PACE Observatory. It's as I already mentioned, it's a global polar orbiting mission. It has a 1,300 local equatorial crossover time every day. Our data spans March 2024 through present. On board PACE, we have the Ocean Color instrument. This is where we get the hyperspectral data. It's hyperspectral, as I mentioned earlier, from the UV through the near infrared. The specifics are there in the bullets, plus our 7 SWIR bands. We have 1 to 2 day global coverage and up to, a pixel size of 1.2 kilometers. And don't let the name fool you. So the Ocean Color instrument was designed with a really high dynamic range. So OCI is getting us just phenomenal data of the ocean, which is a dark target, but it was also designed to function in get great data for very bright cloud tops. So that's going from a very dark target to a very bright one, where of course, that means we're also getting fantastic land data as well. We also have 2 polarimeters that I mentioned a second ago aboard. I won't really go into these too much because they are, we're really focused on OCI data right now with our land capabilities, but we have a hyperangular polarimeter. These are both kind of CubeSat sized instruments contributed by partners. One is wide swath and hyperangular, and one is narrow swath and hyperspectral. And these are giving us This is helping us extend the capabilities of the observatory beyond what OCI could do alone by giving us these highly detailed atmospheric measurements, in addition to the spectral information from OCI. I know there's a lot of MODIS folks here. We often kind of use MODIS as an example of, kind of comparing and contrasting PACE capabilities. These, PACE OCI is really building on instruments like MODIS that have been around for decades, but, flown by NASA and other agencies. In the top row here, you see the spectral response function of a subset of MODIS's 36 bands. Some aren't shown just to keep it simple, but the point here is that the bands from MODIS, they go from blue wavelengths around, 0.4 microns or 400 nanometers to, all the way through the thermal infrared around 15 microns. OCI, if you want to compare the two, has continuous spectral coverage from about 340 nanometers, so in the UV, all the way to about 800 and something microns. Plus, we have these discrete SWIR bands that I mentioned earlier. We do not have thermal coverage that MODIS has, but this kind of gives you an idea of where we can actually, kind of match MODIS products and where we can't. For example, we can't do, hotspot detection with thermal information like MODIS can, but we can do pretty much any products that use, these bands here. As far as further comparisons, resolution, MODIS's bands, at least bands 8 through 36, have a 1 kilometer resolution. We have a 1.2 kilometer resolution. Global revisit is about the same. We have a bit of a gap at the equator, but really see the whole globe every day. Data status, MODIS has, of course, long been kind of standard. Ours is provisional, which is just one step below that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And our data span is, of course, much shorter, with a quarter century of MODIS data and about a little over 2 years of PACE data. As far as our land data products, we like to think about them in two pools or two groups, and you're going to see these two groups echoed through the next couple slides, as well as throughout the other presentations and our discussions, where we provide both heritage products. So these are going to be heritage. These are products we serve now that you guys are probably all familiar with, like NDVI, as well as NDWI, and this whole list here, EVI, CCI, quite a few indexes that have been used, kind of for decades. We serve 6 of those right now. We also serve, in our second bucket of kind of PACE data provision for land folks, we have some advanced data products. One of them is our spectral surface reflectance product. It has 122 bands. It's, of course, what we use to derive all these indexes from. We also provide the photochemical reflectance index, a chlorophyll index, also a carotenoid and anthocyanin index. Each of these kind of measuring the individual pigments using kind of band ratio type algorithms, but with narrow band information from PACE in regions of the spectrum not available from satellites like MODIS. So we're pretty excited about both sets of products, both our heritage and as well as our advanced data products. If you see something here that's obviously missing, let us know. That's part of our discussion is, kind of data product provision and what else we could do. If we take the idea of thinking about, kind of heritage and advanced capabilities of PACE and putting them kind of side by side, I did so in this animation here. These are animations made by the Science Visualization Studios at NASA. And, for decades before PACE, we've had NDVI. We usually see it from brown to green. Here it's shown in, black to white. So kind of less vegetation to more vegetation. And, decades of monitoring vegetation from space with NDVI has really revolutionized our ability to monitor and understand terrestrial ecosystems across the globe, as well as understand their part in the greater Earth system. NDVI has really been an industry standard for applications like climate study, agriculture, forestry management, and more to, really think about describing the amount of plants on land, to help derive their health or how much they produce. It's been, an indispensable tool. And with PACE, we are excited to, kind of add to that legacy. So not only provide NDVI, but also provide these advanced indexes that I mentioned earlier, where we're looking at this animation here on the right is simultaneous. These are kind of going through about a year's worth of change over, of course, roughly the eastern half of the US or North America. And these colors are indicating the chlorophyll index, the carotenoid index, kind of here in purple. I hope you guys can see my pointer. The carotenoid index, the anthocyanin index, and chlorophyll. So we're seeing how these three pigments are changing dynamically in time alongside the NDVI. And a big takeaway here from this is that there's a lot of information content here on photophysiology, which can help better inform us about the plant, plant health or plant function and productivity with these greater levels of information from PACE. So we're pretty excited about it. We hope that we really anticipate that this kind of information, this kind of global daily information, is helping to start a whole new kind of realm of capabilities for space-based terrestrial vegetation science and applications. For folks that are new to PACE data, we kind of like to think about, these user pathways, how people can use PACE data for their work. As you might imagine, we have those vegetation indexes that I've mentioned. We package them all together in one suite called LandVI, where we have those 10 vegetation indexes I already showed. There's the heritage ones, the kind of familiar ones that have been around for decades, as well as these advanced ones or these narrowband ones that are enabled by PACE's finer spectral capabilities and broader spectral capabilities. These are ready now, they're ready to go. Folks can use them for their own applications, whether they want to, stick with familiar or use both, maybe an old one and a couple of new ones to see what kind of new information that they're interested in. We also have folks that are interested in going all the way to the spectral surface reflectance, right? So kind of that's a choose your own adventure type of data product where, you have 122 bands of spectral surface reflectance across the globe every day. That's a lot of information. But with that, you can, kind of develop your own algorithm for your application. You can also apply ones that exist already in the literature, but maybe perhaps couldn't be served before, which is what we did with these indexes, our advanced, our narrowband indexes. They've actually been in the literature for a while. They weren't just developed, last year for PACE or something. They were in the literature for a while, but there wasn't, and they had been, tested, looked through, and, seemed to show a lot of promise, but there wasn't a platform until now that could actually serve them every day. So you could apply existing algorithms, develop your own. You can also, a lot of folks do spectral deconvolution, where they use some kind of approach to have a bunch of, kind of spectral end members, perhaps, vegetation types, and they use that information to one way or another, whether with AI or other ways, deconvolve, kind of what they are seeing in their image area based on that full spectral information. And from here, there's a lot of terrestrial applications that can be served by those data, those kind of user pathways mentioned on the previous slide. There's applications, the data, of course, we can use them to look at wetland ecosystem health, forest health, land use, land change, agricultural, looking at productivity and health of an agricultural region, looking at terrestrial ecosystem diversity. Also, there's a lot of, there's interesting potential there to look at pre-fire fuels in both heritage and new ways, working on calculating them, as well as looking at fire damage extent and vegetation recovery. I'm going to talk about a couple of these, and Skye in the next talk is also going to talk about a couple of these examples so you can kind of see what people are doing. One example we have here is Drs. Emil Cherrington and Kelsey Herndon. They are both, they are early adopters with PACE, and Emil is also our third speaker today. But this is their early adopter project that they're doing with our applications program. And so basically in Central America, there's really high biodiversity. It's an area with huge biodiversity, and conservation is based on maps that have actually were developed, maybe 20 years ago using multi-band information. And so their project is asking the question, can we use advanced metrics from space to make better maps so that the conservation can be better informed? Can we update these maps with advanced data? And to do that, They're moving from the current maps made with like Landsat, a couple multispectral bands, to seeing how they can combine PACE OCI data with its spectral information, albeit at a somewhat coarse resolution compared to Landsat, right, our 1.2 kilometer resolution. But they use that spectral information along with the high spatial resolution JEDI data. So looking at, high spatial resolution canopy height data and PACE data together to kind of classify how the ecosystems across Central America. This is new. This is new, early research, and really excited to see where it goes, especially with this kind of idea of fusing these data types to kind of get the best of both worlds in terms of kind of seeing the ecosystem from these two different ways. Another example that we think is pretty neat, this has popped up recently with Fred Hemrick. He is at UMBC. Some of you guys might be familiar with his work. He has probably done more with PACE-land data than anybody else. He's on our science and applications team. And he's doing really cool stuff with PACE, him and Skye, who's doing our next talk. They recently had this kind of tidbit on some exploratory work they're doing on actually mapping bird diversity with PACE. This is the first that we've seen of mapping any kind of animal distributions with PACE. And the idea here is that they're looking at species diversity of passerine birds. So that's kind of the perching birds like sparrows and robins, and seeing how their species, number of species or species diversity across the country, what does it look like? And this is for June of 2024. And, their diversity is really important to ecological balance because these birds, control pests, they're seed dispersers, etc. And Fred did here some cool work. They did cool work here on where he almost always uses some type of in situ data. Here he's using in situ USGS breeding survey data from close to 2,000 routes across the country. He's taking that data and then he's taking the PACE data that coincides with it and doing a partial least squares regression across all the spectra of the PACE data. So he's using that spectral reflectance to create this. And then the partial least squares regression outputs some coefficients, and they apply those to the PACE spectral reflectance data to make a map like this. And this is pretty cool. It's some of the interesting things to note are that, you kind of see more diversity where you think that there's, kind of where there's more trees in the country, which kind of makes sense, right? But then you see interesting patterns like, there's kind of low species richness across areas like in the Corn Belt, even though there is high, kind of leaf area index, or it is actually a very, green area, even that time of year. So, an interesting question there is this approach is detecting something more than just leaf area as a predictor of where these birds tend to aggregate. And, that's kind of some of the new, kind of some questions that they will be investigating next with this. So this is kind of cool, really cool early work. Skye will be showing a few more examples, and I'm going to round out my presentation here, which is kind of a couple of some resources for you all on how to kind of engage with us as well as find our data. So I want to give a shout out to our early adopters program. This is run by the PACE applications program that I lead, and basically what we do is sorry, I hit the wrong direction. Let me try this again. Basically, we work with individuals, groups across public, private, nonprofit sectors who are looking to integrate PACE data into their decision-making process, their business, their resource management, et cetera. So those of you out there with applied uses for PACE data very much, kind of qualify for being a part of this. Partnerships are designed to specifically kind of amplify the applied research and development efforts and accelerate the translation of our PACE data into action. So there's direct engagement with the NASA PACE project. And, it's a way to kind of fast track your ability to use, to access and use the data for your application. And through partnership with Project Science and the Science and Applications team, as well as participating in events, workshops, and kind of generally being a part of our PACE community. And we also give everybody a PACE, a web profile, and so on. We only have one terrestrial team, and that's the one you just saw. It's Emil and Kelsey. I would very much love to have more folks in the terrestrial realm as early adopters with us. If you have any questions, you can check out that webpage, but please feel free to reach out to me anytime also. My email's there on the screen. I'm glad to chat about this. These last couple slides are user information for data that we want to make sure you all know. So as with any data that you use, you want to know its data status. It's a descriptor of maturity. PACE data across all of our mission are provisional, which means the results are reviewed. They're within expectations, suitable for research, publication, evaluation. But there is still some validation to go, and there could be significant errors, so keep that in mind. And that's, as you can see, this kind of shows a level where the next level is standard science quality. So this is one tick below that. And I already defined what provisional means. But our land data products are unique in that they are subject to more change in future data versions than, say, our ocean and atmosphere products, as we kind of narrow in on what the land community needs. For example, we're considering different atmospheric correction approaches, implementing a different one instead of what we're using now. Question of should we add more spectral bands, more data products, et cetera. And this is a lot of this is going to be based on feedback from folks just like you. Also, our data are considered bonus products by the mission, right? We are at our core an ocean and atmosphere mission, but we get this phenomenal land data and we have the ability to support it through the applications program, but that's differently supported than kind of mission prime products. What that means to you practically as a user is that it just might take a little bit longer for us to get to standard quality, but it also means there's more room for us to kind of alter or kind of provide the products that our community needs, which is what I mentioned in the previous bullet. And so, and we look forward to talking about in the discussion. There's kind of more say from the community in what that final product or what those standard products will ultimately look like. We often get the question whether PACE land data products are validated or otherwise evaluated for accuracy. Yes, I won't belabor this point any further because Skye has, that's in Skye's realm. She's evaluating the surface reflectance data from PACE, and we'll talk about that more in her talk. Finally, I'm going to zoom through this. I have a link for you all to download this presentation, so you'll have all of these links, so don't feel stressed with me kind of zooming through this. You'll get these links. Where do you find NASA data? Earth Data Cloud. There you can download NetCDFs or use our data in the AWS cloud. I've put links here to our level 2 and 3 land data, both surface reflectance and land vegetation indexes. There's various direct data access tools to get NetCDF format and also images from our DAC as well. I listed a couple of tools there at the bottom. They have help features that can help you describe how you can use them if you would like to access our data that way. We also began putting our data into NASA Earth Data GIS to help and got them indexed in the Esri Living Atlas. We would love feedback from you all if you're a GIS user on your needs in this realm and whether the products that we serve the 4 listed here at 8-day averaged and 2-kilometer resolution, kind of what your needs are in the GIS realm, because we would like to expand these over time to meet folks' needs. There's also the Worldview Visualizer, which in general you all just should know about. It has all sorts of NASA platforms on it. It's a fantastic way to just go take a look at the data, create visualizations. It's not where you download data, but it's where you can make great visualizations. You can see if it was cloudy in your area yesterday when PACE flew over, etc. The only land relevant product we have right now on there is our True Color product. We hope to get the other land data products on there as well. This is, I'm not going to wait for GEE users. We have our toolkit. You're going to hear about that in the final talk as well, so I won't belabor that. And as time goes, we look forward to expanding our GIS and GE access. Look forward to information from you all on that. And also PACE land data are being incorporated into PIERS, which we will announce through our, we should have a webinar later this, maybe late this summer, early in the fall, going over this. And we suggest to, if you want to stay up to date with PACE, get information on that webinar, for example. We encourage you to join our community of practice. This is for anybody interested in PACE data. It gives data across all topics of our mission. It's pretty light on emails, and we send out a quarterly newsletter. We also have a listserv for a land data users group specifically. So we very much encourage you all to join that as well. That's our efforts to kind of support the terrestrial community, specifically in using PACE data. So that is my time. I do and we will do, you can, oh yeah, and there's the QR code, and I put the link in the chat as well, so you can download this information. I will pass it off to Skye. I can answer questions in the chat because I know that we want to keep going for time purposes, and also in our discussion session at the end.
So much, Morgaine. As we transition to having Skye present, I wanted to also point out, it's in the chat, but there is a feedback document. And I wondered if you wanted to mention a little bit more about that while Skye pulls her talk up.
Yeah, sure. So we do have a Google Doc that I will put in the chat that we are going to use to guide our discussion later today. And if you have to check out early or anything, we would really love if everybody here could just take a quick look at it and answer any of the questions that stand out to them as something they have an answer to. You don't have to answer every question. We would love for you to. But if you go in there and give us any feedback you have time to give us, it would be fantastic and help us kind of guide what we do next for the land community. The Google Doc is there, and then I will also put my presentation in the chat and hand it over to Skye.
All right, thanks so much. And go ahead, Skye, take us away.
Awesome. You guys can hear and see me okay?
Yep.
I'm gonna assume so. Great, cool. Okay, well, yeah, great presentation, Morgaine, and thanks for having us, Liz. I'm super excited to be here. I've attended AEOIP conferences before, and it's a great community. So thanks again for having us. Morgaine had such a nice setup of the mission and its applications program. So tough act to follow. But for those who don't know me, I'm Skye Caplan. I'm the terrestrial product lead for the PACE mission, which basically means that I'm behind the scenes in our lab working on all the terrestrial data products and trying to make them as useful and applicable to the great work that you all do as possible. So I'm going to use my time here to tell you about how we can look at Earth's land surface with the ocean color instrument, specifically, not the two polar emitters that Morgaine mentioned. So whenever I say OCI, I just mean the ocean color instrument. And it might be a bit counterintuitive to look at land with a sensor primarily designed to look at ocean color questions, but great remote sensing instruments often do unexpected things. So that's kind of what we're getting into here. So with shorter talks like these, I'm going to try to maybe speed through a little bit just so I give Emil enough time, but I'd like to kind of have a one-slide takeaway to show you what I want all of you to come away with. So what I hope that'll be from this talk is that even though you might not have heard of PACE before, or thought its data could be applicable to your interests, its 3 onboard instruments are really, really great at bridging fields and topics. For terrestrial interests specifically, we've seen so far that PACE's hyperspectral coverage of Earth has provided us with some really interesting new views of vegetation dynamics. As you're seeing in that GIF in the top right, it's just the global view of the one that Morgaine showed. And if you're someone that hears the word hyperspectral and doesn't feel like you need all the spectral information that OCI can provide, or you don't really know where to start with it, the thing to remember is that hyperspectral data can be easily used in multispectral workflows as well. And that's something we do actively to produce some of our PACE products, and something that I think will be very useful in the coming months and years as folks reckon with MODIS's end of life, which is unfortunately tragic, but she's had a long life and she's done a lot for us. So hopefully PACE can continue that. So with that being said, we can get into a little bit of what PACE has to offer you currently, PACE OCI again specifically. This is just a slide that's basically a screenshot from PACE's data products table, which lists every single product from the PACE mission by product name, domain, and the levels at which it's available. So Morgaine already did a great job of going over these, but again, just to say if somebody hopped in late, we have the surface reflectance suite, which is 122 bands of surface reflectances, hyperspectral from the UV into the near IR, with 7 additional shortwave infrared bands that are multispectral. And so far, we've been seeing some really amazing science be done with just the reflectance data alone. So I'm excited to see where things go as the mission continues to mature. And then derived from those reflectances is a suite of 10 vegetation indices, some of which are your classic ones, NDVI, EVI, the water indices. But then again, we have those four hyperspectral enabled VIs that get at biochemistry in plant canopies. So we have the chlorophyll index red edge, the carotenoid and anthocyanin content indices, and the photochemical reflectance index. And there's a lot to say about spectral resolution and algorithms for both of these suites. But for time, I'll leave that information to links at the end. What I will say is that both of these suites are provisional, like Morgaine said, so validation is ongoing. I have a slide about that at the end here. And the algorithms used to create them might change in the future when we elevate them to standard, which is hopefully soon. You'll also see the levels tab in this table here that has both L2 and L3, which I can explain a little bit more in detail for those of you who aren't super familiar with the way the PACE is set up. So the thing to say here is that level 2 or L2 data is that regional ungridded swath resolution data set, while level 3 or L3 maps are global data sets containing information for almost all pixels, at least, as long as they don't have clouds. We've got, ocean, inland water systems, and of course land surface pixels. So those can be pretty huge files, depending on the resolution you're looking at, but they're still great because L3 data are produced daily, weekly, and monthly average time steps, and at a few different resolutions, like I said, the finest of which is currently the 2 kilometer pixel, because if you'll remember, OCI's finest resolution is 1.2 kilometers at nadir. So the level 2 files themselves, those regional files are at that finest resolution. But if you want a global view, all in one file, the finest you can have right now is 2 kilometers. So just something to note, because the land community often desires some of those finer resolutions that just aren't possible from PACE, but the temporal resolution and spectral resolutions more than make up for that. So now that we've heard a little bit about the products themselves, I'd like to touch on why I think OCI is such a good candidate for bridging that kind of multispectral hyperspectral gap that, as I said, I think is going to hit us all a little harder in the coming year or so without Terra and Aqua. So MODIS and VIIRS, I should say as well, both make great observations of Earth and have for some time. And part of the original rationale for having PACE terrestrial products was to ensure that these data sets have a continuation of effort and can be used, for example, in time series analysis, even after they're no longer up in space. So the fact that OCI is hyperspectral means that its reflectance data can be easily consolidated into multispectral heritage workflows pretty easily. And this is what we do again for the heritage vegetation indices. We average those bands to make them multispectral-like, just so you get all that photon information that you would have had in the previous versions of the products. And we've done a comparison between MODIS and PACE OCI, preliminary one, but we found that their reflectances agree pretty well, as you can see in the panel to the right there, comparing the red, green, blue, and near IR MODIS bands with the single closest OCI band to the center of each MODIS band. So things are looking pretty good. OCI is presenting itself as a great follow-up to MODIS. And aside from just allowing folks to use multispectral data in kind of a business as usual kind of way, I also think OCI is a great way for people to get to know hyperspectral data and how to use it in a way that's kind of less intimidating than you might have assumed. I know when I first started working with hyperspectral data, it's a lot. There's a lot to see there and a lot to explore. So people often get spooked when we talk about using hyperspectral data because of the huge file sizes and unclear advantages or just the level of comfort there, which is all super understandable. But I think we're going to be seeing more and more hyperspectral data become available in the near future, right, with Eagle and all of these other missions. And learning how to work with hyperspectral data through the lens of an instrument that's similar enough to something that you already know, like MODIS, can lower that barrier to entry quite a bit. Especially for workflows that are already set up and things like that. So sort of like dipping a toe into hyperspectral before going and investigating the full data set. And of course, continuity is something that we are working actively with alongside all the other exploratory hyperspectral applications. So with things like a BRDF correction for the angular component of PACE reflectances, we're trying to incorporate a correction for that to make a more cohesive continuation of reflectances. So again, everything, ongoing kind of deal. We're still a relatively new mission, but things are looking great so far. So I have kind of an example of that balance of heritage and new stuff on this slide. So this is a figure from a notebook that I made showing some of the tools that are available to work with PACE data, how much additional information that the PACE data can give you next to traditional metrics. So the figure shows 4 different Northern Hemisphere forests over the course of a year and how each hyperspectral enabled index looks when compared to NDVI, which is plotted in gray. I'm sure some of you have already noticed a few things, but we could start by comparing NDVI and the chlorophyll index, which is represented here in green. And I do apologize to any colorblind folks. This is not a colorblind friendly plot, but I tried to match the pigments to their color. So next time we'll make a better one. But we can see that NDVI and chlorophyll follow each other fairly closely, which makes sense when we consider that NDVI is at its core a greenness index. But the other two, the yellow and red lines in the image, tell a different story, right? About how pigments other than chlorophyll behave from winter through green up in the spring and through summer and into fall and winter again. And we can see that these carotenoids in yellow and the anthocyanins in red respond in ways that kind of get smothered by NDVI, but can be teased out using the narrowband spectral data OCI provides. So this can give us more information on plant pigment cycles and stress, potentially leading to more information for land managers in the process. And NDVI is really helpful for putting all of this stuff into context. Another example of the utility of PACE in this domain actually requires the hyperspectral measurements from OCI. So we've had success retrieving GPP, or gross primary productivity, from PACE reflectances alone, which is exciting because it creates an independent measurement of ecosystem GPP, and which can then be used to examine kind of spatial and temporal responses to environmental conditions, and compared and contrast with the vegetation indices like NDVI that used to be a part of these calculations and weren't able to be untangled in that way. So the plot on the lower right of this slide shows the quality of the retrieval that we can get when we have a good set of training data and focus in on a vegetation type. So in this case, the Guanica tropical dry forests in Puerto Rico. We can see just by looking at the orange and blue lines that PACE's GPP retrieval follows very closely to the GPP, the in situ GPP from the flux tower on the site, while the green line of NDVI is really missing a lot of those early and late season dips in productivity. So PACE's near daily repeat cycle helps us with these retrievals, since site training and comparison data is so abundant, just because you're going over every day as long as the sky is clear, of course. And at high latitudes, there's even potential for multiple overpasses a day, which could provide even more insights on transient productivity patterns and things like that. So for another example use case, I'll talk briefly about wildfires. I might speed up here again just for time, but this is a DNVR analysis, or a difference in normalized burn ratio analysis, that we did for Grampians National Park in Australia. There were 2 fires in late 2024, early 2025, and doing this analysis with OCI has allowed us to go beyond the typical 1 month on either side of the fire to see the dynamics of these fires during the burns themselves. So again, as the sky is clear, we know that there were 2 fires in this complex, one in December and one which started in January, and we can watch how those burn scars evolved over time with the temporal resolution of PACE OCI. We're considering other fire products as well, which use more of OCI's capabilities and their hyperspectral nature, I should say. And I should mention that the figure on this screen comes from a tutorial series that focuses on the synergistic uses of PACE and EMIT as a mission, which is aboard the ISS, another great hyperspectral mission. And I'm writing that in collaboration with the folks at LPDAC and NASA Earth Data. They've been great, and I'll talk a little bit about that later as well. And I know I said that this talk is only focusing on OCI, but I would be completely remiss if I didn't mention at least a little bit of the work being done with the polarimeters, in this case, HARP2. Especially since we all recognize the Earth as a system, it's really important to talk about how we can look at the outcomes of fires in addition to just the burn scar tracking. So my colleague Mangao at the Ocean Ecology Lab has developed an algorithm called FastMapole, which uses the HARP2 data to go beyond aerosol quantity metrics into characterizing the size and the scattering of those particles, which leads to better understanding of aerosol types. So in this scene from last year's LA fires, we can differentiate the smoke plume from the fires from a dust plume a little farther south. And that can be really important when we're tracking aerosols and air quality degradation due to things like burning. And of course, we can map the DNVR of these fires with OCI as well, which is a really nice example of 2 separate PACE instruments working together. And I think that was the last case study that I have for you. And by now you might be wondering about the quality of PACE OCI data, which is a completely fair question. And my short answer for you is, like most of the terrestrial PACE work that we have here, is that the validation is ongoing. And it focuses currently on surface reflectance, but preliminary assessments have been super successful. One of which I'm showing here that uses Railroad Valley data from the Radiometric Calibration Network. We're exploring other sites as well, such as Land HyperNet. In the meantime, I can show and tell you all that the reflectances are overall looking pretty good, as you can see on the slide, with minimal mean bias and small RMSE over Railroad Valley. Of course, the caveat is for this assessment that it's one site, granted over the full PACE lifetime, which is great, but hopefully we'll have more diverse and robust assessments for you in the near future. And if anybody does in this audience have an in situ data set from the past 2-ish years that they think could be helpful for this effort, please reach out and let me know. I would love to hear about it and use it in this assessment, because it's an effort, a fun one, but we definitely need more data. So now let's continue on to the latter half of this presentation that are going to focus more on resources for getting started with PACE data, since we've gone over what types of data we have and how they can be used. So Morgaine briefly discussed Earth Data Search. I'll skip that, but I would like to mention the Help Hub, which contains a whole bunch of tutorials on working with PACE, among other satellites as well. And we've been developing several tutorials, some of them specifically geared for terrestrial folks that I hope are helpful in easing some of the heartburn that comes with exploring a new data set. These tutorials are written in Python, so if you're familiar with a bit of code, I think they can be great resources. And the 3 that I've called out here that I think would be most useful for this audience are how to grab data with Python, a general overview of the surface reflectance and vegetation index files and how to work with them, and then finally how to put the level 2 data on a regular grid. And that last tutorial also shows you how to export these files as geotiffs rather than netcdfs, so they can be easily imported into something like QGIS. We're also hosting several Help Hub Hotline, is what we're calling them. They're summer sessions, which are designed to give you direct access to us, the PACE team, to answer any questions about the tutorials or PACE data that you might have. I'll be there representing PACEland, so please stop in. Even if you don't know what questions to ask, we'll be giving quick 10-ish minute demos of some relevant tutorials related to the themes you see up there that might be useful for you. And don't worry about the links. I have them in a QR code later in this slide as well. But it should be fun. I'll be there. Come hang. And then one of my last slides. I know I'm about at time. But basically, we also have a couple collaborations going on. Again, that LPDAC NASA Earth Data team that I spoke about before has been really, really fruitful. We're writing a PACE and emit tutorial series. The first two, actually, I guess the first three here are listed. One of them helps you find co-located emit and PACE data. The next aligns that PACE and emit data for you in a way that makes them much easier to use together. And then we will also have two other case study tutorials on those wildfires that I mentioned, like the Grampians National Park fire in a couple slides ago. I also learned recently, like Morgaine mentioned, that PACE level 3 data is currently in the appears app, which is fantastic because it will help you manage those file sizes of the level 3 data. So if that's something that you're aware of, or maybe you're not aware of, but you are now, you can please check that out because the LPDEC team has been wonderful to work with and they've done a lot of work for us. So I'm thrilled to see that there. Finally, as Morgaine again said, we have GIS capabilities as well in ESRI's Living Atlas and NASA Aegis, which is really exciting. As a GIS person, I know it's important to have these data sets ready to use and accessible. So they're there for you if you are a GIS user like I am. So that's it. I'm a minute-ish over. Read the slide at your own pace. Pardon the pun. Didn't mean it, but just so you all know, there's a QR code there with every link and every kind of resource that I've listed in this whole talk. So yeah, thank you so much for your attention, and I'll take questions at the end, I think.
Thanks so much, Skye. I appreciate your talk, and I think that's some really interesting information. Everybody, don't forget about the discussion questions that are online. Here, I'll put the link in again, just in case. And while Emil gets his screen up and ready, oh, look, it looks like he's already there. Okay, so we'll jump right in and let Emil take over and talk to us about the PACE OCI toolkit.
Thank you so much, Liz. And of course, thank you, Morgaine and Skye. And it's kind of hard to follow on that. Just to quickly say that I'm based at the University of Alabama in Huntsville and also NASA Marshall Space Flight Center. And I'm supporting an effort called NASA EarthRISE, also joined here online by another colleague, Phoebe Odur, in the audience. And just to say that last year in coordination with Morgaine and Skye, we developed the toolkit just as a way to get PACE data because it's awesome. Available in Earth Engine, knowing that, again, we're platform agnostic on the NASA side, but there's a huge audience of data users in Earth Engine. And so just in the interest of time, I'm just going to jump through these things really quickly. And I was also going to use that pun about, you can check out this stuff at your own pace, but Skye already said that. And so the main thing, there's a GitHub repo page that you can see here. I just posted some links in the chat. This is one of them. And here's where you can find out more information. And the toolkit really is, think of it as like a bag of scripts. And so the scripts are structured in what you see there. And also, if you do have issues adding the repo to Earth Engine, there's a link there on how to do it, as well as additional resources, just in case you might be a little rusty with Earth Engine. So just jumping in, there's obviously a little README page that provides additional info if you do have questions for me afterwards or something breaks, because I was tweaking scripts this morning, procrastination style in prep for today. And so if something breaks or whatever, please feel free to reach out by email. But again, in terms of what you'll find there, the bigger things, and I'm just going to jump tab to tab, again, just in the interest of time, because we do want to leave some time for discussion. You're going to find scripts regarding data discovery. And so, for instance, there's a bunch of them there, but since most folks, I assume, are based here in the US, if you click on that script that says count images, all NASA Hyper US ALHSV, it's just images over Huntsville, Alabama, where I'm based. And it'll pull up data that's available from Hyperion, Emit, PACE OCI. And the first thing you'll see is what seems to be an error. but it's basically that there's no Hyperion imagery was actually captured over Huntsville, Alabama. That said, just a few weeks ago, emit imagery was captured over Huntsville. And in addition to that, just giving you that list of monthly OCI surface reflectance mosaics that are available over different parts of the U.S., including over Huntsville. And then and there are different examples there. And of course, if you're so interested, you could also just change the location there to your own location of interest to find imagery that's there. If we now jump from that folder to the other one, it talks about data viz, just in terms of being able to view the data sets themselves. You'll see here an example script that's just allowing you to visualize the PACE OCI mosaics over the continental US. And then also in that same folder, let's see. Actually, not the same folder, but jumping to the other folder. And again, apologies for the speed. Over where it says spectral signatures, there's a subfolder called Viewer, Launch PACE OCI Viewer. There's a little link there that if you click that and pop that up, then it pops up this an Earth Engine based app. And for instance, if I click on Huntsville, Alabama, and then I click on forest in the center of Alabama, I click on some water, I click on some ag, other parts of the U.S. This will then pop up spectral signatures based on that PACE OCI data. And the interesting thing about this, I can also do those spectral signatures based on different dates. I should also give credit where credit is due. Dr. Sam Roy, formerly of Planet, formerly of Vantor or Maxar, he developed a viewer using Tanager data, and this is basically just taking his code but using that for PACE OCI data. And of course, if you like the signatures and whatnot, you can export those out, or again, you could just using the different scripts that are there, I just view those there. Again, since we're coming up almost on 10 to the hour, if you jump to the other subfolder that talks about time series analysis, the example that I have pulled up here, again, centered over Huntsville, Alabama, where I and other colleagues are based. If you click on that one, it'll pull out individual VIs or pull out all of them. And the really interesting thing is kind of, just knowing the phenology of areas here in the southeast, like Montesano State Park, which is located not too far from where I'm based. You just kind of see how, for instance, EVI is tracking over time, and you see that the EVI is peaking in, basically part of spring, and how that cycle is repeating. Or you could also, pop up that graphic and look at the other vegetation indices that you heard Skye and Morgaine talk about, and also track how those are changing with time. And then lastly, in terms of the different things that are offered in this bag of scripts that I mentioned before, one of them is using basic machine learning to look at, for instance, in this case, unsupervised classifications of what's there. And again, this example is based over Huntsville, Alabama. But again, you can tweak the scripts to do this over really wherever you want. In this case, I already hit that run button. And here we're just looking at the different spectral clusters that are being popped up, depending on, again, how many clusters you specify for that. So again, in this case, you're seeing different forest types in the south and central part of the state versus in other parts north, where if we could unclick that, you kind of see where some of the other classes seem to pertain more to agricultural lands in the state, etc. And again, in the interest of time, one of the last things I'm going to say, and again, please explore these at your own pace, but this script, or these scripts rather, point back to another repository that you can also have access to. And this is where you're going to find the references to all the different data sets that are loaded in. And then there's another script in there that loads things like the band names and wavelengths, et cetera, for all of this. And again, since I know that we're now about 8-9 minutes from the end of that, I will stop sharing screen and pass it back to Liz and others. And thank you.
All right. Thanks, Emil.